Well, according to the American Psychiatric Association, addiction is a complex condition of the brain where a person has compulsive substance use despite there being harmful consequences. People with addiction tend to have an intense focus on what they're addicted to the point where it takes over their life. What makes it so hard to break an addiction is that it can change the way your brain is wired, giving you harsh cravings that make it difficult to stop. Studies of brain imaging have even shown changes in areas of the brain that relate to judgment, decision-making, learning, memory, and behavior control. So is this what's happening with Facebook and social media? It's hard to say for sure. That being said, we are starting to give more credit to an addiction that might be pretty similar: video games. That's because the American Psychiatric Association includes Internet gaming disorders as disorders that requires further research, but that can result in clinically significant impairment or distress. The World Health Organization has also added gaming disorders to their International Classification of Diseases, which is used by medical practitioners around the world to diagnose conditions. Now, online video games are obviously not the same as a site like Facebook, yet they do have similar social aspects.
This kind of approach is kind of the way some students approach preparing for standardized tests. In order to get test scores to go up, teachers will end up teaching to the test. Now, that approach can work. Test results often do go up, but it fails the fundamental goal of education: to prepare students to succeed over the long term. So, given these obstacles, what can we do to transform the way we transform organizations? So rather than being exhausting, it's actually empowering and energizing. To do that, we need to focus on 5 strategic imperatives, all of which have one thing in common: putting people first. The first imperative for putting people first is to inspire through purpose. Most transformations have financial and operational goals. These are important, and they can be energizing to leaders, but they tend not to be very motivating to most people in the organization. To motivate more broadly, the transformation needs to connect with a deeper sense of purpose.
Right now, I would like to talk about the global market, a dance floor where nations, large and small, move to the rhythm of supply and demand. In this dance, the markets are not just a place of transaction but a stage where the economic health of a country is displayed. Healthy markets signify a thriving economy, where goods, services, and currencies flow seamlessly across borders. Moreover, the concept of market equilibrium is key. It's the sweet spot where the quantity of goods supplied meets the quantity demanded, leading to stable prices and satisfied consumers and producers. As we delve into the complex world of economics, let's remember that it's not just about numbers and charts. It's about the human stories behind them, the jobs created, the families supported, and the communities built. Understanding the markets equips us with the tools to contribute to an economy that serves everyone.
But for these things that we actually do really care about and do experience profound regret around, what does that experience feel like? Well, we all know the short answer, right? It feels terrible. Regret feels awful. But it turns out that regret feels awful in 4 very specific and consistent ways. So the first consistent component of regret is basically denial. When I went home that night after getting my tattoo, I basically stayed up all night, and for the first several hours, there was exactly one thought in my head, and the thought was, make it go away. This is an unbelievably primitive emotional response. I mean, it's right up there with, I want my mommy. And we're not trying to solve the problem. We're not trying to understand how the problem came about. We just want it to vanish. The second characteristic component of regret is a sense of bewilderment. So the other thing I thought about there in my bedroom that night was, how could I have done that? What was I thinking? It's this real sense of alienation from the part of us that made a decision we regret. We can't identify with that part. We don't understand that part. And we certainly don't have any empathy for that part, which explains the third consistent component of regret, which is an intense desire to punish ourselves. That's why in the face of our regrets, the thing we consistently say is, I could have kicked myself.
One of the most important principles of Einstein's general relativity is the equivalence principle. It says that all objects, regardless of their mass and composition, would accelerate in the same manner in the same gravitational field when no external forces act upon them. Confused? Let me put it in simple words. Suppose you simultaneously drop a feather and a stone towards the ground from the same height in a perfectly resistance-less environment. Which one, according to you, will touch the ground first? One may think that as a stone is more massive than a fragile feather, it should experience more gravitational force and hit the ground first. But that's not the case, because as per the principle of equivalence, both objects should fall simultaneously on the ground. In other words, one can say that the inertial and gravitational mass of a body is proportional to each other, which makes the acceleration independent of the physical nature of the body. Now, what is the difference between inertial mass and gravitational mass? The mass that appears in Newton's second law of motion is termed inertial mass. It simply describes how difficult it is to accelerate an object. On the other hand, the mass that appears in Newton's universal law of gravitation is the gravitational mass. It depicts the strength with which gravity acts on a body.